Hi there, my friends. Have you ever wondered who starts the idea for a new law? Today on Homefront, I bring you a discussion I had with political pundits Dave Cort and Lloyd Sloan. Instead of me interviewing them, they are interviewing me on Dave Cort's show. You will hear the answer to the question you've always been wondering about concerning how legislation is cultivated by the lobbyists and the inside.
I'm an American, red, white, and blue, and I'm a citizen of this world and of heaven. Some things were meant to be together. I believe in faith and freedom, got a country too. I believe with faith and freedom, we're gonna make it through.
Welcome to Homefront. I'm Cynthia Davis, your host, and I'm here to help. From parenting to public policies to political advice, join me in taking America back one family at a time.
Rise up, we gotta stay strong, 'cause everything's on the line. We gotta rise up, we gotta stay strong, to save our way of life.
As a speaker, writer, former legislator, mother of 7 and wife of 1 for over 30 years, I bring you my experience.
Don't lose your freedom.
And now it's time for Homefront.
Don't lose your freedom. Let's talk about it.
Few people follow or even understand how much influence the lobbyists have on the legislators. But there is a definite connection. Big corporations wouldn't be spending the millions of dollars if they weren't getting a return on their money. Recently, there have been several news articles about how bad it is out there. ALEC stands for the American Legislative Exchange Council. On today's edition of Homefront, I let you in on a little conversation where I unpack for you what is right and what is wrong about the process of lobbyists influencing legislation. Curiously, a big part of the media outrage is because this organization is having an effect on free market legislation. But what you don't hear is what's happening with the left-wing legislation that's also being pushed by other organizations. Ultimately, we have to ask the question, are the legislators merely puppets? And who is in charge of the asylum?
Cynthia Davis will be along in a bit, and that will be a good talk. Cynthia is always fun to talk to, both entertaining and educational, and very principled. Lloyd is in the room now. How are you doing tonight, Sloan Ranger?
Very good, Kimosabe. I'm back. Yeah, fantastic. I also look forward to talking to Cynthia Davis. That's going to be good. You know, what's on her mind tonight? Do you know?
Well, I specifically approached her about ALEC because we had some discussion earlier this week about ALEC. As you know, a Georgia radio station blasted out a very uncomplimentary news footage about an ALEC meeting in Savannah. I know a lot of good conservatives, good conservatives.
I did see that. Yeah.
Who like this group. There's a lot of money there in this report, and understand, audience, that I get how easy it is to make a news report look negative or positive. But in this report, there was a lot of secrecy involved. I'm not a fan of that. There were armed officers keeping the press and the public out of this meeting room that was clearly full of high-dollar lobbyists and state legislators having a large meeting. Now, ALEC is the American Legislative Exchange Council, begun some years ago with the noble idea of getting the legislators of the different states together to bounce ideas off each other on good, solid state legislation. No sense in having
makes sense.
Having to do the same thing over and over again from the ground up. Makes perfect sense. Then along comes this idea, not a bad idea, of, well, the things that we do here have an impact on the people we're trying to attract to our state, or at a minimum, if we're good conservatives, at least not drive out of our state. It's not necessary if we just remove the barriers, in my mind, to people wanting to come here to make money, not necessary to entice them. All we need to do is remove the barriers. So it was suggested, I guess, that maybe these people should be part of the discussion. Well,
fair enough. Yeah.
And listen, I'm making this history up, of course. I know that ALEC started as a good, solid, conservative group of legislators getting together to bounce ideas off each other. I know that for a fact. I know that somewhere along the line, it turned into this high-dollar, super high-dollar lobbyist legislator coalition. So,
yeah.
I'm just kind of reasoning how this happened. So as the groups get bigger, as the meetings get larger, as the travel gets more intense, as the things stretch out over 2 or 3 days, these things start costing a lot of money, to where you get to the point where today a legislator who wants to be a member of ALEC has to pay $50 a year. A corporation that wants to be a member of ALEC pays anywhere from $10,000 to $15,000 to $20,000 a year, depending on what level of influence or sponsorship they get. And now a legislator with his $50 a year ticket gets invited to these meetings, like this one at this Savannah high-dollar resort hotel for several days, wine, dined, and entertained, minus his $50 investment, and talked to by these people who have good ideas on what the state should do. Now, if you go to ALEC's website, you're not going to find a lot there in the model legislation that you disagree with. Maybe 1 or 2 things. I found 1 or 2 things that I disagreed with. They, for example, will not come out against Common Core.
Interesting.
Yeah. But they're very good at writing legislation that...
They have model bills for states. Yeah, they do.
Yeah, they do.
On different topics, but they have no model bill on education. I mean, what is there? No. Education is probably a major part of every state budget. You would think that ALEC would have something on education.
The ALEC Executive Committee took a vote and decided not to go anti-Common Core. They didn't in this vote, I think in the wording of it's kind of mamby-pamby. They didn't decide to go for Common Core. But the proposal was made, of course, that they should stand against Common Core, and they declined to do that. Now, that is the executive committee or the legislative committee or whatever they call the committee that kind of makes the decisions. ALEC, as an organization, of course, is neutral. ALEC, as an organization, is neutral on everything because they're a 501c3. And this is the part of this thing that really gets me, okay? AT&T pays $250,000 a year to ALEC, a 501c3. ALEC uses that money to fund what they call scholarships, which allow legislators to come to ALEC meetings and get educated. Okay. And so a legislator from the state of Missouri can accept one of these scholarships, go to a resort with a bunch of other legislators to get educated at no cost to him except his $50, and there may be a $10 or $20 admission fee. I don't know. If Cynthia is not currently a member, we may get Carl back next week or the week after and because Carl is still a member and still swears by ALEC. He is still very, very impressed by ALEC and still likes ALEC a lot. So we'll find out if Cynthia is a member, and we'll find out some of these intricacies when we talk to her in a bit. But for now, these corporations have paid these massive amounts of money to ALEC, a 501c3, to be members of the organization, of the group, to be sponsors. ALEC, a 501c3, then turns around and gives these dollars out in scholarships to legislators who go to these meetings and get fed and get housed and get entertained and get educated. The education, of course, is coming from the corporate heads, from the head of AT&T and RJR, and they're doing all the educating. They're introducing this model legislation, but it's not lobbying. There's no lobbying money that the corporations have to declare that they paid anyone, because all they did was make a contribution to a 501c3. And there's no lobbying money that the legislator has to declare, because all he did was accept a scholarship to go somewhere and get educated. So if you fear that General Electric and AT&T and RJR and Verizon are the man behind the curtain, then ALEC is the curtain.
Yeah, exactly. They're the ones. It's clearly it's definitely lobbying, as far as I'm concerned. The average person is going to call that lobbying, period. That's their understanding of it. It's influencing legislators.
It is.
Legislators.
Now,
and that's what people mean by lobbying. So.
Now, as we've said here 100 times before, last time, about a year ago, we talked with Carl about ALEC for about almost an hour. And as I said then, and as I firmly believe, lobbying, quote unquote, has a negative connotation to it. If Keith Carmichael takes 3 people from COS up to Jefferson City and goes door to door and meets with 5 legislators for his convention of the states, he's lobbying. If Ron Calzone goes up to Jefferson City and meets with 6 legislators about the Second Amendment Preservation Act, he's lobbying. If Gretchen Lowe goes up and meets with 10 legislatures about Common Core, she's lobbying. So lobbying should not necessarily have an overtly negative connotation. Anybody who goes to Jefferson City, especially if they go as a group, to meet with a group one at a time or in a group to affect a piece of legislation, is lobbying.
I mean, it's impossible not to have lobbying, to do legislation without it.
Even believe it's inherently evil to buy a legislator lunch. Or to, if I go have a business meeting with a guy and I'm trying to sell him on me, I buy him lunch. And as long as those things are declared, and you can go to the Missouri Ethics Commission right now and you can click on any legislator in the Missouri legislature and see their declaration of how much money they accepted in meals and beverages, baseball tickets, whatever they accepted from a lobbyist. You can see it. It's all out in the open. Everybody knows. I don't have a deep-rooted, principled objection to any of that. I have an objection to the secrecy, to the veiled lobbying, to the immense amounts of money that are changing hands through a 501c3 corporation where nobody has to declare who's getting what, from who, for what. If AT&T wants to come to Missouri and try to buy 10 legislators, as long as that's out there for the voter to find, I get a real kick out of the people who, on the conservative side, who jump up and down with glee about Citizens United and think that it's the best thing since sliced bread. Great call by the Supreme Court. And then moan and groan and moan and groan and moan and groan when corporations spend their money on politics. I don't understand that at all. I see Cynthia's just pulled in. We're going to bring her online. She's chatting with Lloyd here for the moment. We'll get that thing going. Cynthia, how you doing?
Hi, it's good to be here with you. Thank you.
great to have you again. I always love having you on. You can drop by. You don't have to wait for an invite, Cynthia. Just drop by. Sometime you've got something that you think everybody needs to know, just drop in.
Well, I do have something everyone really needs to know tonight, and it's my honor and privilege to get to enlighten you.
Okay.
Okay, you ready?
Enlighten me. Let's do it.
Do it.
Fasten your seatbelts, okay? Because I'm about to give you an education, and we'll call this class Lobbying 101.
Okay, here we go.
Not only did I spend 8 years in the Missouri State Legislature, but I spent even more time than that in city government. And as long as there have been opportunities for people to buy influence, there have been lobbyists, and there are elected officials who are easily malleable. So my education started with the O'Fallon Board of Aldermen, and even back then there were lobbyists all over trying to influence decisions. The Home Builders Association and the trash hauling companies and all the municipal opportunities to make money off of contracts. The lawyers like to take the elected officials to ball games too on the municipal level. So when I was in city government, we had what was called the National League of Cities. Okay, NLC for short.
Right.
The National League of Cities was the same thing. They had annual conventions, and we would go and learn. And I spent my time learning. Most of my colleagues were out on the golf course. So while they're out having fun, I was getting educated. It didn't bother me because I didn't understand enough of what it was to feel like there's some wrongness being perpetrated. But let me tell you, when I got to the state level, I discovered that there were 3 organizations. So now, municipal level, we have one organization, National League of Cities. Move to state, there are 3 organizations. There's the NCSL, which is the National Council of State Legislatures, and that's primarily Democrat. It's statist. It's growing government bigger. They try to claim they're neutral also, but there's no question that that's the Democrat group. I went to one of their conventions one time in my 8 years, and they were making jokes about Republicans, and it really felt like I was in a foreign country because as a Republican, I was in the minority. Plus, the majority of the people who attend the NCSL meeting are Democrats. So it just was a different environment. It was a frou-frou also. It's just that they were pushing big government ideology. Now, you've got the opposite organization called ALEC, ALEC, standing for American Legislative Exchange Council. It is very similar to NCSL, but it's smaller, a lot smaller, because there are fewer people who care about conservative ideology. But nevertheless, this ALEC attack that you're hearing about in the media is another one of those partisan swaps. They're trying to take a swipe, I'll call it. They're trying to say, oh, ALEC is bad, but NCSL is good. Ha ha! No, both of them are opportunities to meet with your favorite lobbyists and go out to dinner and have fun. So I'm just trying to offer you a little balance into the equation. I'd like to see some equal bashing of the NCSL if they're going to do that. By the way, all the state legislators, by default, are automatically members of both NCSL and ALEC because their state, at least the state of Missouri, at the time I was there, was the one that paid the membership fee. So it's not like I said, oh, I want to join ALEC or, oh, I want to join NCSL. No. It was automatically done through the state bureaucrats. They signed up.
Really? No, that doesn't help me at all. Now, that I'm going to tell you, the League of Cities, the Council of Cities, I talked about them a couple of years ago. I did a 1-hour program on them, and my biggest bone of contention with them, aside from the fact that because of the state of our cities, they are far left wing. My biggest bone of contention with them was that they are using my tax dollars to bash me over the head. I kind of had a little bit warmer feeling about ALEC because I thought each legislator paid his own fees, his own membership dues, so to speak. Are they using my tax money to pay their membership dues?
Absolutely they are. And even if they were allowing each legislator to pay his own dues, he'd be paying that out of his expense account, which is still money coming from the taxpayers. So don't kid yourself. It all comes from the taxpayers. These legislators don't get elected and then say, hey, I think I'm going to spend $500 out of my private bank account to support Jeffersonian principles. Which, by the way, is the point of ALEC. Is they were designed, and in their mission statement, they are to promote Jeffersonian principles. So who can't be excited about Thomas Jefferson?
Yeah, I don't think Jefferson had too many.
Let me tell you how far those Jeffersonian principles went.
Can you give me an example of something ALEC actually proposed that Jefferson would have approved of?
Yes, the Healthcare Freedom Act, which I sponsored.
Okay,
I'm the one who got the model legislation from ALEC. I was the first one to get the thing filed, and I got a lot of publicity out of it. Then everyone else, if you look at the legislation, we all pretty much filed the same thing. So that's fine. We needed health care freedom, and I'm proud of it, and I'm glad ALEC was there to show us the way. So I'm not saying all of the model legislation they propose is good, but I'm saying, yes, they certainly do have model legislation that's good. Now, I got beaten
Were
up.
we the only state that passed that? I'm curious. We were the first to pass it, but others passed it too.
Oh, yeah. It's a very popular idea. And
this was ALEC's solution to Obamacare.
Right.
This was their preferred solution.
It was their boilerplate language that they supplied to me that I could file if I want to opt out of Obamacare for my state. And so here's the point. There are some good ideas. Don't think just because the media hype is all beating up on ALEC now that ALEC is bad and the Democrat group NCSL is good. In fact, while I was there, I'm sorry, I'm getting all cranked up now, but while I was there, and when I went to the NCSL sends all the legislators information as well, and they were going to give us something that we could take to our public schools for Constitution Day to help them celebrate. Who can't get excited about Constitution Day? Yeehaw! Yeah, so we were ready to do Constitution Day until I took a moment to watch the DVD that they handed me that I was supposed to hand over to my public schools. And it would take your breath away. It was that bad. Fortunately, I was one of the legislators who paid attention to what I was doing, but think about all the legislators. There's 7,000 plus state legislators in the whole country. How many of those are going to hand off this bad material to their schools, acting like...
they all. Yeah.
Yeah. So
they trust ALEC. So,
yeah,
they're going to do it.
Well, the point is for them to get influence with all groups of people. So this particular one showed a video of some kids. It was talking about how great government is. And if we didn't have the Constitution, we wouldn't have any government. And if we didn't have any government, we wouldn't have any schools. So these two kids in the show were going to go to school, and they're like, oh, no, there's no school. So then they said, well, if there were no government, the kids said, let's go to the park then. They went to go to the park. Whoops, no park. If there's no government, there are no parks. So then they said, well, then let's make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. And right in front of them, their peanut butter and jelly sandwich disappeared. And they said if there were no government, there'd be no FDA, and nobody would be able to scrutinize your food. And, I mean, it was horrible.
Oh, yeah. So, yeah. Under the Articles of Confederation, no one could have a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. It's very well known.
My point is, NCSL has just as many bad ideas as any other lobbying group, and that's what I got from them. Now, there is a third organization called CSG that stands for the Council of State Governments, and that one is more neutral. I've gone to several of their conferences while I was there, and they do a better job of walking the narrow line of not being either Republican or Democrat. But there's no question that in our Republican caucuses, the word was, we need to go to the ALEC conferences. And I learned a lot. I will say it was educational, which is the purpose of the organization. So if you want to be educated, you can be educated. I think there's some validity there. Yet there are other representatives and senators who went for the fun dinners, and you'll always have that. Always. So I'm not trying to bash any group or support any group. I'm trying to offer you some objective facts that will help you understand better.
Thank you. That's what I was after. You know, I saw this news report. I blasted it out on Facebook and the social media. I got a lot of really hard negatives, and I got a couple of hard positives. Carl Bearden really likes the group. He's still a member of the group and still quite active in it. And I talked with him right here a year ago this month, I believe, for quite a while about ALEC, and he built it up quite nicely. And I see some value there. I'm not totally opposed to it. Now, tell me, this is going to be telltale. I'm going to guess, just take a wild guess, that the same Jeffersonians who spend $250,000 to be sponsors of ALEC spend $250,000 to be sponsors of the NCSL. I'll bet you RJR Reynolds and AT&T are at both meetings, right?
There would be some overlap, but NCSL is like 5 times, maybe even 10 times as big.
Right.
Yeah. They don't want to be players. They want influence. They want to have access to ideas. They have a convention hall where they give you little pencils and trinkets to take home with their names on it. So it's all good. The reason Carl Bearden is so supportive is he actually won an award. He won the Thomas Jefferson Award, and there's a picture I have that was taken of me and Carl together with him holding up his Thomas Jefferson bust. But Carl was very involved, and I'm happy for him. I like believe,
Carl, yeah.
Yeah, we needed to learn. However, let me tell you how rough it really was when push came to shove, and when it was time to actually discuss the meatier issues. Everyone is allowed to attend these various subgroup committees. I was appointed to be on the Health and Human Services Committee, which I really enjoyed because it was...
Now, are you in the House or at ALEC?
Each state has a certain number of slots where the state chairman can appoint different legislators to be on different subcommittees of ALEC.
Okay.
So ALEC has subcommittees, and the committee to which I was appointed was the ALEC Health and Human Services Committee. That had 100 people on it. Half of them were legislators and half of them were lobbyists. So we sat at the table and we discussed cutting-edge ideas, and we discussed what's happening, trends, and things to watch out for. And then the membership was allowed to propose model legislation. So the model legislation didn't just come from the lobbyists. There were legislators who were allowed to also propose model legislation. And I even proposed a piece of model legislation one time. However, here's what you have to realize. If they're all about Jeffersonian principles, which is freedom, liberty, personal responsibility, and encouraging limited government, you would think they would have loved my midwifery bill. That was this. I know you guys may not see the humor in this as much as I did, but I had a bill that I passed out of the Missouri House that would legalize the midwives. Missouri was one of a very few states where it was illegal to practice midwifery, and Missouri was the only state where it was a felony level, meaning you could go to jail in handcuffs for delivering a baby if you're a midwife in Missouri. So I thought, well, surely the Jeffersonian principled people at ALEC are going to love this. I'm going to show it to them. Then what happens is they vote on it, and if it passes, then it goes into their archives of model legislation. All my bill did was say that the practice of midwifery is distinct and different from the practice of medicine. It is, and it should be treated as such. But there were so many medical professionals and people who were jaded about how we have to have the medical establishment that I truly got knocked out cold out of that discussion. I mean, there was so much opposition that I walked out of there with my tail between my legs and said, I'll never do that again. So I will say that it is somewhat dominated by an agenda that has to do with how can they make money, because midwives are a direct threat to the medical establishment.
Sure. Yeah, I have 2 grandchildren alive and well today who were born in my daughter's bedroom.
I'm not here to argue if it's good or bad. I'm here to say if you believe in limited government, the only correct position you should have is to let people make their own choice.
Right. That's exactly right. Yeah.
That's not
that
even
would apply to more than just midwives, but yes, true.
Yeah.
It's got to start somewhere. My point is I received severe opposition there, although I received pretty stiff opposition even in Missouri. In a freedom-loving state like Missouri, the only way we ended up getting it passed was through chicanery, which is nothing to be proud of. But the point is, we should all be such liberty-loving people in this state that should be a no-brainer.
Oh, Cynthia, but you can't just drop that bombshell. We got to hear about the chicanery.
Okay.
You can't just drop that on the table and walk away.
I brought up the bill for debate, and what was fascinating about the whole debate is it cut across party lines. And I had both the Democrats and the Republicans mad at me over this one. And it really was fascinating to watch why. They were upset for different reasons. The Democrats were upset because they like bigger government. The Republicans were upset because they too like bigger government. There are people in both parties who love freedom, and those were the ones who were with me. Sadly to say, there are not a majority of freedom-loving legislators, even with the Republicans in the majority, for it to pass. And so I did get it passed out of the House. Actually, Carl Bearden helped me that night. It was about 10:30 at night, and we were debating bills. And at the end, when they make the motion to adjourn, you can tell it's coming because they start, and now we'll take announcements. Sometimes when we go to the announcements, the legislators will start packing up their notebooks and picking up their papers and clearing their desk and actually leave the chamber before we have the vote to adjourn. So a high percentage of them walked out of the chamber thinking, oh, they're on announcements, we're going to end soon. Well, to be funny, whenever they say all in favor, say aye, and then most people are sleeping at that point, so you'll not hear very many say aye. It catches them by surprise, and then when they say all opposed, say no. And just to be funny, a lot of us did say no, just to be funny. Well, Carl Bearden was in the dais, and he said the noes have it. We will continue. And so he pointed his finger at Tom Dempsey, who said the next bill up will be the midwifery bill. And there was blood draining out of people's heads. And we started the debate. and it went on for an hour and a half, and it was vigorous, and there were people at each other's throats. There was a doctor on the Republican side of the House who was so angry that he looked like he was going to get in a fist fight. Because there were some who left and went home for the night, they had no idea we were continuing the debate, including my midwifery friends who would have loved to have stayed for the debate, but they even were home snoozing by the time this came up. And then at midnight, we got tired, and Tom Dempsey called for the previous question, which passed. That meant we're going to go ahead and vote on midwifery. We took a vote, and thank the Lord it passed.
Wow. Now,
That's
is there
in the House. Then the Senate filibustered it. Then we met with no success the next year. And then during this time, John Loudon, who was the head of the Insurance Committee, at the end of session, saw an opportunity to hide it in a very obscure part of a 158-page insurance bill. I don't know how many pages it was, but when you get to an omnibus bill, you get to something that's pretty scary. We only pass usually one omnibus bill for each committee per year, and that was it. It was a whopping big bill. And sadly, the House and Senate have two different sets of rules. The House says if you want to change a bill, you have to offer an amendment. You have to defend your amendment, and then you have to have a vote on the amendment. If the amendment passes, then it goes into the bill. Sounds easy, right? Well, it should be that way. The Senate, on the other hand, has a clever little trick called a presto changeo. They can take a bill, everybody go to sleep, and the next morning you walk into the chamber, and the Senate has what's called a substitute. And they can change anything they want overnight.
Yeah. Senate committee substitute, right?
Yep, it's a Senate floor substitute. They came up with a different bill that had one extra sentence in it, and nobody found it. And John Loudon knew that he could not use the word midwifery because there's software out there now that can pick up on that word. And as soon as anybody saw the word midwifery, of course, there's no way it would pass. So he used an archaic word that's not been used for about 100 years called tocology, and it came from a Greek word. It said the practice of tocology will be authorized if the group is accredited by NOAA, the National Accreditation Organization. So that's all it said, is tocology can be practiced if it's approved of by a national accreditation group. And nobody caught it until after it passed and after the House also voted for it. Nobody even in the Senate knew it was happening. So that was the chicanery. The last few weeks of session, people can't read that many pages.
Yeah. No, you're right.
You have to have a magnifying glass to get every change that happened. So John Loudon knew what he was doing, but he did not tell anybody else. And the senators showed up for session. They had a substitute bill. He said, there's really nothing big changed in this one. It's pretty much the same except for these few little tweaks. And then they went ahead and took the vote. Once it passes, it passes. They are on the record. You cannot say, well, I didn't know what was in it. No, you voted for it, and it passed. So there were a lot of people angry. He got treated very badly over it. But if chicanery is the only way it can pass, those are the rules. It was a legitimate procedure. And the Democrats did that on us all the time. In fact, Missouri repealed our sodomy laws in the same way because the chairman of the law committee in the House figured since Lawrence versus Texas had been a Supreme Court case, that must mean that sodomy is now legal in all 50 states, so therefore we might as well do a little housekeeping measure and remove 14 words that said you can't do sodomy in Missouri. Now, we didn't find out till after it was done, and it was one of those provisions where once you take it out, you'll never get it back.
Hi, friends. Do you like what you're hearing?
Then go to my website. It's cynthiadavis.net and sign up for my newsletter. You'll get all this information and more when you sign up for my email reminding you of when you'll hear another podcast and letting you know what's coming up next. Besides, we always have a little bit of humor at the end, so go to cynthiadavis.net and stay in the loop. For those of you who don't like email, go to my Facebook page. It's called Homefront with Cynthia Davis. And make sure you click the like button. That way, you'll have a convenient way to see what we're doing and to get the word when another podcast is released. That's Homefront with Cynthia Davis on Facebook. My website is cynthiadavis.net. That's where we keep all our good stuff. So if you want to get our newsletter and find more podcasts, go to cynthiadavis.net. Hey, let's stay in touch.
Well, thank you for that story. That was quite exciting. You made so many good points in there about these omnibus bills, and it was last session. I gave up this session. Last session, I just for the sake of doing it, I tried daily to keep up with the stuff that was coming up in the last week. I would bring up the bills, I would look them over, and I mean, just limiting myself. The bills are very clear, and they put bold print in anything that's new, and they put brackets around anything they're taking out, and just concentrating on those things, just concentrating on the changes. I couldn't keep up. I mean, there was so much in some of these bills, and you're not exaggerating, 150, 250, 1,000 pages of legislation. And it's crazy. You know what I long for, Cynthia, is a governor who will say, when he or she is campaigning even, I will veto any bill that comes to my desk that has more than one subject or that has a subject in it that's different than the title.
They're not trained that way. Here's what happened.
Whether it's a good bill or a bad bill, I will veto it if it violates the Constitution.
The attorney for the House met with the Republican caucus and explained to us the way it's got to work. He said, if any bill comes through your committee, you guys have an obligation to put on it any bill that you want that will fit within the subject. And then we pass it out of committee that way. Then it goes to the floor. And then the House Research Department will help the legislators figure out what bill opens up what section so they can throw their bill onto a bill that's moving. And Don LaGrasso, the attorney for the House, said that is a terrible wasted opportunity for any bill to come out of committee, especially if it's a Senate bill without any House amendments on it. Well, this is a problem. It's like, imagine a choo-choo train, okay? We've got a train going down the tracks, and we're trying to throw as many cars on it as we can. And as long as people have that attitude, we're not going to get clean bills.
Right. Well, and I mean, if that's the case, they certainly have a very liberal interpretation of. I was reading a couple of bills last year, and there's no way even some of these cars weren't even train cars. Some of these cars they were tacking onto this train were Oldsmobiles. I mean, they were nowhere near the title.
Well, that's because there is a little bit of interpretation. The rules are if it's under the subject heading or if it fits under the same chapter that's been opened, then it can fit. And it's also left up to if a judge notices or if a lawsuit's filed. So we are letting the judiciary run the whole government now.
Oh, yeah.
It was to be the smallest branch, but now the legislators get away with whatever they can as long as there's no judge who tells them they can't. Who's going to define what is right and wrong anymore? If the legislators don't police themselves, if the floor leader doesn't say, no, that's not, I'm talking about the leadership of both parties still has to give a head nod to it.
Right.
What's the objection to having two subjects on a bill? Maybe it's time to abandon that anyway. What's the value in that?
Yeah, Lloyd, file two different bills then.
Yeah, but why not? The reason you have to do it, honestly, is because you need a compromise. So I'll say, look, I'll do this for you if you do this for me. Okay, but I'm just saying in principle, you realize the Missouri Compromise, one of the great acts of American history, it's a great piece of law, but it had multiple subjects in it. So what? The Compromise of 1850 is a major act of American history. Constitution itself, multiple subjects. So I don't know that it's that evil to have multiple subjects in a bill. I think the problem is the omnibus bill that went through that nobody knew what was in it, obviously. So they passed something that they have no clue what they're voting on. That's an obvious problem. I mean, you ought to know what you're voting on.
Let me tell you why it's evil. Because every single time they throw more garbage on it, we shift to the left. We're losing every time. All this art of compromise, it's not the art of compromise. It's going to the left. Can you not open your eyes and see that we're getting shysted every time we do this?
I actually think we're going to the right, but, because I think we're going fascist, technically. Not technically going socialist, we're going fascist. But, I know what you mean.
See we're growing government bigger. Let's agree on that. Let's call it what it is.
We're definitely growing it bigger.
And my point is, every time you see bills get with tons of stuff thrown on it, you end up with more statist government, you end up with bigger government, you end up with more intrusive government, and you run with more expensive government. It's costing us all money. And nobody can see that that's wrong. So, I am opposed to having all these big, hefty bills because they're not serving our issues well. They're not serving people who want to limit government. Somebody's got to get a grip on it. And if it's not happening from the leadership of the party, we're doomed.
In our case, as we both know, the Missouri legislature anyway is veto-proof majority Republican. So I'm not sure where the compromises are needed in the legislature at this point. They're certainly not needed between Republicans and Democrats. And Republicans can pass whatever they want at this point, anything.
You are right. And when I got elected was when we had the major shift from 48 years of the Democrat parties running the whole state for 48 years. And my class was the cleansing class. We were the ones who were going to right all the wrongs that had been perpetrated on our state for 48 years. And Catherine Hanaway was the Speaker of the House. She came to the caucus meetings, and she said, if anybody has an idea for a bill, file it. If a Democrat has an idea for a bill, and if it's a good idea, steal it. I will let the she's going to let the Democrats not have their bills heard because that's what they did to the Republicans for all these years. And now you see more and more Democrat ideas getting passed, and it's every year we're seeing the trend march in a long direction toward the edge of the cliff. And I don't know how we're going to rein it in, because when we compromise, we don't ever get any ground. We're not getting ground back. We're losing ground every year.
Yeah, I don't think it's compromise that's doing it. I think it's a failure of the Republican Party, honestly, because we're not actually having to compromise with Democrats. That's what I'm saying. I wouldn't blame it on compromise. It's definitely true that compromise can lose ground, but it's gaining ground for one side or the other. Clearly, the big government side is loving compromise because it always goes their direction each time. And, the way I see the compromises, honestly, is Republicans are interested in protecting the wealthy class. And this is consistent in their behavior. They protect big business. They protect corporations. They protect the wealthy. Democrats, they at least they talk class warfare. They're interested in big government, which Republicans, turns out, don't care that much about as long as they can protect the wealthy from it. And so what happens is we get a compromise. Government grows, which is what Democrats want. Big business and rich people get protected, which is what Republicans want. And we go fascist. So that's actually what's going on, in my opinion. How do you reverse that? You got to compromise the opposite direction. You got to undercut the Democrat base, which is the poor. So you do deals for the poor that also cut government for us. So you cut the privileges from the rich. Tons of examples out there, but dome stadiums for football teams, things like this, special tax breaks for corporations, and then in exchange for that, you cut the taxes on the poor. Okay? And so you do that, you get a compromise going the other way, you win. We're not
Lloyd,
there.
let me give you another
parties.
perspective to test out. I don't know who they're trying to protect more than themselves and their campaign donations. That's what's significantly grown in the time I've been there. It used to be that real people who were just honest, nice guys could put their names on the ballot and they would win if they're the best and they work the hardest, if they connect with the people. Now it's gotten so expensive that whoever wins is the one who gets the most lobbyist campaign contributions. And if you check the reports, you'll find that the vast majority of the money is not coming from real people. It's
No,
not
it comes
coming
from big
from
donors. Yeah, it all comes
yeah.
from
So what's going on? And I've watched this trend happen. I got elected for the first time in '94, and I spent less than $1,200. Then every year it got a few thousand more, a few thousand more, a few thousand more. Now you've got people who are paying $100,000 for a state rep seat that gives you a salary of $35,000 a year. I mean, what's up with that? Why would anybody pay more money to win a seat than what they'd get in their salary?
It's not their money.
Right.
I would like to see a reform where if you give more than, I'll just throw out a number, but $1,000 to a campaign, then you cannot benefit from any government spending, contracts, whatever, that would in any way be touched or decided by that elected official. Okay? So that would pretty much shut it down. So you're welcome, Mr. Corporation or Mr. Labor Union, to give all the money you want. You can be all the patriotic you want. But your union and your corporation can benefit from no government spending or contract that legislator or elected official would have any dealings with. How's that for a reform?
Well, that would make sense, but if you watch the bills that are being passed, they're the ones that have the biggest funding stream attached to them. Bills that aren't funded don't go anywhere. So there are legislators for sale who are selling their souls for what can be gotten back out of it. And
sure.
I'm saying even this right to work, why did it come close last year and the year before? Because it was a great fundraising opportunity for both sides.
For sure. Oh, yeah. The issues there to fundraise off of. It also begs the question, why wouldn't right to work cover midwifery? But I guess that's a separate issue. True right to work would cover it, right? If we really meant right to work, then it's like, we would have abolished the licensing of every barber in Missouri in one swoop. We wouldn't have licensing anymore. Even the doctors would freak. But
I'd
anyway.
and then every year we get more licensing bills. How is that helping us? It's not.
It's fascist. I mean, it technically is fascist. The Americans do not know the right terms for this. They think the government is socialist, and sometimes it is, no doubt about it. But more often than not, it comes from Mussolini. It comes from fascism. There's no attempt there for the government. It's not like the public schools, which are socialist. It's more like Obamacare, which is fascist. The government doesn't own it. The government controls it. And frankly, big corporations gain. They don't lose, they gain. And they don't oppose this stuff either. It's not true.
Lloyd, would you explain something to me? Why are the Republicans not fighting fascism?
They are fascists. Half of them are fascists, okay? I mean, you started as a good Republican. I call you a good Republican. You're a small government Republican, traditional family values. Those are all good things. That's not a Bush conservative. It's not who George Bush was. We both know that. He is more of a corporatist. Control the economy. That's why he's got Common Core. That's why he supports that stuff. These are top-down, elitist. They're a different kind of conservative. Let me just put it that way. And conservatives come in different flavors. It's hard for people to understand, but liberals come in different flavors. Thomas Jefferson was a liberal, called himself one. Liberalism begins in that era. So, there were some liberal. Milton Friedman used to call himself a liberal. So they come in different flavors, and so do conservatives, so do Republicans. Some of them are extremely hawkish, extremely militaristic, and that's always been associated with fascism. There's all these different combinations. We tend to funnel everything through this two-party mold or formula as if all the world, 300 million people, can be reduced to two stupid political categories, donkeys and elephants. Are you kidding me? Just on our conversation, the three of us, if we start talking issues and we throw 10 issues out there at random, we probably agree on half of them, but we're going to disagree on some of those issues too. That's three people that actually get along pretty well, right? So you take 300 million people trying to funnel them all into two parties. Of course the plutocracy wins. The people with the money win that fight. They control it. They can funnel those options down to only two. They can funnel it down to Jeb Bush versus Hillary. Yuck. The rest of us are just absolutely disgusted by those choices. But Goldman Sachs, I guarantee, is happy with that choice. That's what's going on. And they didn't teach you that at ALEC, did they? No, they wouldn't teach you that because $250,000 of it came from AT&T. So it's unlikely that you would hear this on the true definition of fascism from ALEC. That's my 2 cents.
That's fair. I'm just saying that nice guys finish last, and that's never been more true than in our political system. We're having a lot of nice people who are there for altruistic reasons who are getting creamed because they're not part of the agenda.
Sure. Oh, yeah.
And that should sadden all of us because I don't see how we're going to correct it with what we've got right now going on.
I'm very disappointed to hear that there are even state rep races that are being decided with that much money, because I do think that is our lowest level state elected official, right? The state rep in the legislature. That's about, as far as I know, that's the lowest, okay? And it's the most representative. How many people does a state rep represent? I think about 40,000, something like that. State senator, probably about 3 times that, 120,000, something like that. The
state
higher up you, yeah, go ahead.
38,000 and senators.
So yeah, and that's about 3, and there's a third as many senators or something. So and then the higher up you go, okay. So you get to the governor's races and statewide races. That takes a huge amount of money to win those races. They are clearly controlled by by the ruling class, if you will. I don't care what terms you use for this, but the more money it takes to win those, you can probably still win a state rep race by doing extreme hard work and being known within your district, going around talking to people. I think that's still doable with 38,000 people. It is not doable when you get to a Senate race, and it's definitely not doable on a statewide office. That takes a huge amount of money. The media comes in, and it's controlled. The parties definitely control that. And the higher up, and you know how little power a state rep actually has in the House, okay? The Speaker has a lot of power. And so they funnel this stuff, and they channel it, they control it this way, to where they can concentrate the power, and that helps the privileged interest, and it keeps the system the way it is. We do have to break through that. It's going to take considerable effort to do so, and people have to get educated. Let me give you my beef with ALEC since I've got you here. I don't know if you can stay on, too, but I do have I liked the Health Care Freedom Act, and I voted for it, but can we be honest with ourselves? That did not fix Obamacare. Is that not clear at this point? So let me remind you, this was their best idea to stop it, right? Nothing else came across. This was their best. And anybody who passed it would have known. I knew when I was voting for it. I voted for it, but I knew it would not stop Obamacare. Okay? Was that a surprise? Does that disappoint you that I got no other ideas on how to stop this from a state level? That's one question, okay? And that's probably the big question I have with ALEC, because if we're not getting these ideas out there on how to do this from the states, it leads me to the Convention of States idea, which I do believe ALEC is supporting now. I'm not certain about that, but I think they are. There may actually be some that's probably worth discussing. At least ALEC is maybe taking off the gloves now and saying, okay, let's push back a lot harder than we were before, because passing cosmetic legislation isn't going to do it. We got to get some teeth into this. Go ahead and comment on that, because that's my perspective of it right now. If that's the most effective thing ALEC has ever done, then it wasn't very impressive, right? It did not get the job done.
Well, there's no shortage of bills to be filed. There are a lot of bills, and they can come from many sources. The legislators don't need to wait for some national organization to give them model legislation to know how to file bills. Most of the bills that I filed, I just came up with an idea, and then I would go to the legislative staff, legislative research office, and have an attorney draft my idea into a bill. So the amount of legislation being offered from the ALEC boilerplate, that's not most of it. Most of it
I would guess that too.
Yeah, so the legislator has total control over this. The ideas I got for actually most of my bills originated from David Barton's group, Wall Builders. They had a conference every year that I went to, and they had the best ideas of all. So we all have our opportunities to get informed. Most people think that legislators are people who are so smart about laws and everything. No, they're not. They don't have to know anything about anything except how to win an election. And if you have enough money, you can pay somebody to figure that out for you too. So we end up with a situation where it behooves all of us, if we can get those offices to file what resonates with our own philosophy and do what we think is best. Unfortunately, the leadership gets to pick what bills go anywhere.
No, I agree, and I didn't expect most of the bills to come from ALEC. I really didn't. What I think they could serve as is a clearinghouse sometimes for all over the country. States are passing good laws all the time, bad ones too, obviously, but we want the good ones. And so I really want an organization that can be a conduit and say, hey, did you see what West Virginia just passed or what Oklahoma just passed on Common Core? Maybe you guys ought to do this. That I would love to see get going. I thought ALEC would be a good organization for that. Maybe not. Maybe David Barton's group. Frankly, anybody could do it, including a group like Barton's or whoever. And it doesn't take $250,000 from AT&T to do this. It just takes some reasonably intelligent people who can follow these bills and pass them on and have some credibility. So when I see those kind of contributions coming from big players, I know what that means, and it means they have a veto on what ALEC proposes. It's not necessarily true that ALEC will do whatever AT&T wants. That is, they will not necessarily do that. Just because AT&T says do this, they won't do it. However, if AT&T says don't you dare propose that bill, they won't. They get too much money right now. So it does create a filter through which ALEC cannot propose certain types of bills based on the kind of donors they're getting. See what I'm saying?
Yes, and also the person with the money bag, as everybody following him, the Pied Piper. If you get a reputation of being somebody who can fund campaigns, you'll have the legislators eating out of your hand.
This has been another edition of Homefront.
I'm Cynthia Davis, and I thank you for joining us. We're taking America back one family at a time. I sincerely hope you heard something that left you feeling inspired, motivated, and ready to engage our culture. If you enjoyed our show, you can find more at cynthiadavis.net. You can also find me on Facebook at Homefront with Cynthia Davis. Have a great week, and make sure you come back next time for another edition of Homefront. Hi there, my friends. Have you ever wondered who starts the idea for a new law? Today on Homefront, I bring you a discussion I had with political pundits Dave Cort and Lloyd Sloan. Instead of me interviewing them, they are interviewing me on Dave Cort's show. You will hear the answer to the question you've always been wondering about concerning how legislation is cultivated by the lobbyists and the inside.
I'm an American, red, white, and blue, and I'm a citizen of this world and of heaven. Some things were meant to be together. I believe in faith and freedom, got a country too. I believe with faith and freedom, we're gonna make it through.
Welcome to Homefront. I'm Cynthia Davis, your host, and I'm here to help. From parenting to public policies to political advice, join me in taking America back one family at a time.
Rise up, we gotta stay strong, 'cause everything's on the line. We gotta rise up, we gotta stay strong, to save our way of life.
As a speaker, writer, former legislator, mother of 7, and wife of 1 for over 30 years, I bring you my experience.
Don't lose your freedom.
And now it's time for Homefront.
Don't lose your freedom. Let's talk about it.
Few people follow or even understand how much influence the lobbyists have on the legislators. But there is a definite connection. Big corporations wouldn't be spending the millions of dollars if they weren't getting a return on their money. Recently, there have been several news articles about how bad it is out there. ALEC stands for the American Legislative Exchange Council. On today's edition of Homefront, I let you in on a little conversation where I unpack for you what is right and what is wrong about the process of lobbyists influencing legislation. Curiously, a big part of the media outrage is because this organization is having an effect on free market legislation. But what you don't hear is what's happening with the left-wing legislation that's also being pushed by other organizations. Ultimately, we have to ask the question, are the legislators merely puppets? And who is in charge of the asylum?
Cynthia Davis will be along in a bit, and that will be a good talk. Cynthia is always fun to talk to, both entertaining and educational, and very principled. Lloyd is in the room now. How are you doing tonight, Sloan Ranger?
Very good, Kimosabe. I'm back. Yeah, fantastic. I also look forward to talking to Cynthia Davis. That's going to be good. You know, what's on her mind tonight? Do you know?
Well, I specifically approached her about ALEC because we had some discussion earlier this week about ALEC. As you know, a Georgia radio station blasted out a very uncomplimentary news footage about an ALEC meeting in Savannah. I know a lot of good conservatives, good conservatives.
I did see that, yeah.
Who like this group. There's a lot of money there in this report, and understand, audience, that I get how easy it is to make a news report look negative or positive. But in this report, there was a lot of secrecy involved. I'm not a fan of that. There were armed officers keeping the press and the public out of this meeting room that was clearly full of high-dollar lobbyists and state legislators having a large meeting. Now, ALEC is the American Legislative Exchange Council, begun some years ago with the noble idea of getting